to tonight's meeting. We are here after going into closed session at 6 o'clock, back in open. First, I need approval of the minutes from our May meeting.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion on those minutes? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I need approval of the agenda. No changes?
Nope.
No changes?
Move approval of the agenda.
Second.
Discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Public listening. Peter, have anything to say to us tonight? Okay, thank you. Reports. No students, no teachers, but we have board members here. Anybody have something to report?
It was my
Julie.
pleasure to join Joan at the CISA 2 meeting. Definitely twice the fun when you go with someone. It was very interesting and informative. The new guy that's in charge, Dan Hanrahan, seems like quite the live wire. He's shaking the rug big time. So implementing a lot of focus on business practices, Steve, which you would appreciate, and on advocacy and innovation. So he seems like quite the live wire. He's got some good people working under him, and he's definitely very enthusiastic about all the services CISA has to offer. The featured speaker for the evening was a guy from Homeland Security, John Bush. He's the Homeland Security guy assigned to the state of Wisconsin. So he did a little presentation on active threat preparedness, because he says it's a mistake to say active shooter training because the threats come from all kinds of different means now. One of my biggest takeaways from him is he favored the short and sweet. He's got a military background, and he says, trust me, the shorter and sweeter and simpler you can keep the training, that's what your brain reverts to in a crisis. So he referred like what we've all learned, stop, drop, and roll with fire. So he was in favor of the run, hide, fight as a means of addressing any kind of school threat in the building. Because run if you can, hide if you can't, fight if you have to, and reducing it down to those things was pretty interesting.
One of the things that I thought was very interesting is he said, I think he said no one has died in a school shooting with a locked door. And if we could just reinforce locking doors, you know, it's too hard if the door's locked, they go on.
The concept of barricading the doors. He talked about the Virginia Tech shooting in particular, where the shooter went to one classroom, shot a bunch of people, went to another classroom, shot a few more people, went to a third classroom, and between that time, there were people still left alive in the first classroom. They barricaded the door. He came back and wanted to get back in there, and he could not, and there's lives that there's no doubt were saved because they couldn't get back in.
But so, just locking the doors. And they also, he had pretty good data about just putting that film, or I'm not even sure what it is, over the windows, that for a security measure, that seemed to be a good payoff, that people are.
I asked about that in particular. I asked if he had anything to do with the requirements or putting together the policy for the school safety grant, and I asked in particular what, because in my mind, the film, it was like, okay, who's got a contract that makes that film, and why are we helping those people? But it's more than that. It's to shatterproof that glass, and so he said the same thing. That would keep them. You know how many of those classroom doors now have a side panel that's glass. And he said the harder it is to break that out or shatter it, again, that's effective as the same as barricading the door.
It's got two parts to it. It's
Yeah.
got the film, and it's got it's called a connector, which
Yes.
is basically it's this type of a caulk that holds it in place.
Right.
And that you can't just knock it out.
Correct, that was it.
Right.
So that was interesting.
Yeah, good,
Yeah.
it was actually really interesting, good evening.
Mhm.
Anybody else have anything to
I
share?
went to the girls' soccer section game.
Oh, good for you,
Talked to some
yeah.
parents and so forth, and I think, you know, they really were pleased with the way the program is heading
Yeah.
and getting the changes that are made.
Good. Any other? Great.
Well, Randy and I went to the last lacrosse game in Waunakee, found out we don't know any of the rules. And I think the board, instead of just showing Waunakee and everybody should make sound, they should start putting rural interpretations up. Because I have no idea why half the things happened that happened.
I went to the state game on Saturday night and I had more questions.
Oh, I think how? That's what I say.
Yeah, great sport. Kids did great. They were second at state this year in lacrosse. And they got to the sectional finals in soccer and lost 1-0 to Oregon.
And tomorrow baseball plays at
8
8 a.m. So up and early.
Yep, a lot of kids.
Okay, strategic planning, starting with community engagement.
Yep, 2 things tonight just to go over quickly. One is on community engagement. And I've shared with you over the last probably over the last 6 months, maybe over the last year, of wanting to look at how can we do some stepping forward with telling our story, particularly through social media. One of the things I know some of you have seen Andrea Gribble and her work with social media for schools. Just a little bit of info. I mean, I've got a chance to sit down with Andrea at my last conference this spring and actually talk to her more about exactly what she does. Rebecca and I did a webinar with her where she spent about 45 minutes with us talking about kind of what her approach is. You can just keep flipping through. Heidi Fellers is her assistant. She lives in Reedsburg. Was a teacher by trade, got into communications and now works for Andrea as really kind of her second in command as far as the orchestration of this. They're in about 60 districts right now, primarily most of them in Wisconsin and Minnesota. And really their whole focus is telling the school district story through really 3 mediums they use, or 4. They do primarily Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And they utilize those venues to really tell your story. And they have a person that they would assign to us to then be the orchestrator or the coordinator of all this. And our involvement is sharing those pieces and then we manage the entire process as far as getting them up, making sure everything's accurate, making sure things are up to date, and then tracking the metrics of it. So here you can see the picture of mainly what her team is. Andrea's business model is that many of the folks who manage this just happen to be stay-at-home moms and stay-at-home parents, and that's kind of how she has continued to expand her work. They're, as she states it, they're 24/7 as far as what you need. They can do most of their things via their phone. When I was with her this spring, there was an error on somebody's Facebook page and she pulled up her phone immediately and changed it. So their customer service is excellent. She just went through, this was a PowerPoint sheet provided, she was just pulling up pictures that she found on our website or elsewhere. But her whole point is community, it's in slides, so it kind of jumps all over. You can stay right there. Her big piece is how do parents and people get their information, and saying that social media is a place where you have a large section of our community population is gathering info. You can keep going through.
I went too far.
Did you go too far? Yeah. Don't hit it yet. Did anybody get a chance to watch the video that was on here? So I don't want to replay it if everybody's already watched it. This kind of just gives you an idea, and it's testimonials about what actually is occurring. If you want to see it, it's about a 2-minute video, so we can show it. It gives be some good information for the people in the public to see exactly what this looks like. So this is just kind of an introduction to really what they do and testimonials from districts that have used her.
Social Schools for EDU has really taken that pressure away and has really helped navigate that portion of what we do in our school district. So we can focus on teaching and administrating and making decisions and policies and referendums and all that.
I think from day one, it's been just very easy connecting with you, with your staff. Just really took it from start to finish, helping us through every little step of the way.
I love getting the data that shows me the number of contacts we've had, because that's my premise has been all along. How do you engage people? I really see us impacting the engagement of our community through this.
I know they're connected because when I look every morning, I open our Facebook page and I'm able to see all the different likes and the comments and things like that.
We have an opportunity now to share all of the learning and the quality opportunities that we have here in the Cumberland School District in real time.
That's your focus, and you can see the difference. Just very similar to our curriculum coordinator or our principal or our 8th grade history teacher. If their job is just to teach 8th grade history and not worry about anything else, they're going to be a dang good 8th grade history teacher. And I think that's the same thing that happened with us from experience. Your role in our school district is to keep our social media going the way it's going.
What's up, everybody? A new year means new clothes, so come to the King Clothes Shop and check out our new selection.
Well, I certainly wholeheartedly can endorse our experience of Social School for EDU, and I wish I would have done it sooner. Make that phone call, have that meeting.
If communication is a key and you're looking to brand and showcase your successes, it's not a want anymore, it's a need.
Pretty much guarantee that it is going to work because it's something that has worked for us and for other districts, and it's a great thing.
So I actually got the chance to talk to some of those folks who are represented there, but I also talked to superintendents from Reedsburg, from Stoughton, from Monroe, who also utilize the service, just because those are folks that I'm very familiar with and know personally. And they've had very positive responses. Talking to Tom Benson from Reedsburg, who was very much afraid of the social media platform and said it's probably the best thing he's done. They do keep the comments piece open as part of their process, and he says that they've had really, they felt that to be a very healthy piece, and really the pieces that have been concerning to them have been almost non-existent, and they've been in it for 18 months. They just went through a referendum effort, and they felt that being able to do, they've done some of their Facebook Live type things, and they've done videos that they've pushed out on social media, of which they were having many more hits on than they ever would have had people coming in person to get the information. So from my perspective, when we take a look at really what we're trying to do as part of engagement with the community, and trying to get our story out, which is a piece that I know we've talked around the table quite a bit about, I think this is a great first step. You have districts that have communication specialists, and they still are continuing to contract with Andrea's group to continue this aspect of it. What it really means and how it looks for our staff and for us is they will set up an email account that will have Herb Halbert set up. It'll be something like social media at Waunakee Schools, whatever that is going to look like, and information, pictures that teachers can then push out to that website or to that email address. Our coordinator on the end of social media for schools will then grab those and will then put them into the different venues. They will link into any Facebook pages that are already out there. They'll link into like some of our staff that do Twitter. So I'm looking at, Kim does a lot of Twitter, Brian Kirsten does, Aaron May does. They want to see those. They want to make sure that we have a common hashtag, and then that common hashtag will be able to be promoted, and people can start to follow that. They will follow it and then retweet and post those items as well. It's really a piece that our involvement is sharing the picture, sharing the short bit of the story. They manage the whole piece of it. So I'm pretty excited about this being a direction for us to go to really reach more people and to get more of the positive things that are happening in our schools out, and give us a venue to communicate in a medium that really is almost non-existent for us right now. What I've included in your packet are 2 contract options to work with them. The cost is $11,500 for a 1-year contract. 3-year contract, the cost drops down annually to $10,500. But that's for all management of it. They'll do any of the design of our sites. They'll take our logos. They'll take all of those pieces, put those together, and it's for their time to manage this. They want to have a minimum of what did it say, Rebecca, 2 posts per
two per day.
per day. They want to be pushing out, And so that's really the direction that I'd like us to go. And I really wanted to bring it here just to bring it in a little bit more formal setting to show you exactly what the process looks like. What they would do for staff is they will come in and work with first of all, a launch with our administrative team to really talk through kind of the logistics of it. And then I would have Heidi come in the very first day that we have our welcome back with staff, and she would spend about a half hour talking to staff about how they can help be part of this and what she needs from them to share the stories out. So that's kind of the format as far as how this would look. The piece that I think is valuable to us is it allows us to get into this format, keep it current, and have somebody who can manage it for us. So with that, I'd open it up for any questions or comments.
I guess I still don't understand, you know, what do you feel that we're not getting out into the public?
I think
You know,
right
with
now,
the-
Jack, I don't think we have a venue to really talk about all the stuff that happens on a day-to-day basis in our schools. You get the things that are promoted in the Tribune, and you get, if you have a child, you can see what's happening within their narrow scope of what they're involved with. But as far as the general feeling of what's happening across the district, I don't think that that's present. And I think that this can get a much more bigger piece of being able to tell the story of what we're actually doing in schools and share that piece out. I just think right now we have very few venues that we do it other than word of mouth, people's personal experiences based on what they see with their kids, grandkids, etc., or what the Tribune promotes. And the Tribune hits part of it, and they hit a lot of sports, but there's a lot more to what we do than just those aspects. So that's what I think it'll hit, and I think it'll get into the classroom, because I want it's not going to be something that I see me or Tim being the ones populating it. It's going to be populated by people on a daily basis in the classroom at the root of what's happening in our district. That's what I think.
To that standpoint, though, how does the privacy piece work in terms of students in a classroom?
Yep. It'd be similar to like what we would have for sign-offs for pictures. And right now we'll have to add that to some of our pieces for registration. As far as, do you want your child to be part of those? And the teacher's going to have to know who those are. Right now we have kids who don't want to be part of published pictures, and the
Right.
teachers know who those folks are, and they just have to be cautious of that.
Well, we got a reputation of being a good district. We've got people moving in because of it. I look at 11 grand or 10 grand as a third of a teacher.
Well, that's one way to look at it, but I look at it in terms of informing the taxpayer, which the majority of people in our districts don't have kids actually, right? Taxpayers in the district actually don't have kids going to the schools. And there's a lot of really interesting things going on, and education has changed a lot. And I do think we have positive stories to tell, and I think it's past time we do it.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I think this is a great venue. I think it's really needed. There are so many things that happen in the school that nobody knows about. They know about sports, and they know about, you know, the concerts and the plays, but other than that, they don't know the day-to-day cool things that happen in, you know, in the reading program, in the math program. Nobody knows what's going on in the buildings. And I think that those are important things that people have an opportunity to keep track of. You know, it's a choice. People may not ever turn it on, but I would bet after it gets up and going 2 a day, people are it's gonna catch on, and people are gonna start looking at it, and it's gonna be I think it can only promote good things.
How does this work with, I know you've been talking about possibly getting to the point of hiring a communications director, which to me, this is a subset of a communications director. So if we look at this and then look at hiring that person, is this in addition, or would this then become part of that person's purview?
I've talked to districts that have that, and you've got some that have done both. You've got, I know some districts that have the communications person, and they're focusing on, that's a pretty all-encompassing position. And they still are working with Andrea to manage this. Now, they're doing some things to help utilize that and push that more than just in a more formalized way. But they're in some areas, they're doing both. They have a communications person and they're contracting here as part of a service. You've got others who have moved in different directions where one of the things that Andrea's group does too is they also do consulting. So if you wanted to hire somebody and then you are having somebody to help manage that, well then they would be, you could have somebody internally doing it. There's both models out there, Dave. Where we're going to be, I don't know, because I think I'd want to see where this falls and see what our needs are and what our response is as we go forward.
Have we had parents or teachers or staff come to board or administration in general and just say, you know, we need more of a presence on Facebook? I mean, is anyone actually saying that we need this specific need? Because I'm relatively new to the district in terms of being a parent in it, and the one thing I've never looked for is, well, I'd like to be connected to Arboretum through Facebook. I've never needed it, but.
Have I heard that specific request? No. Do I see social media and the web being a place where more and more information is shared? That's what I see. We are very non-existent in that space. And I think as far as how we tell our story about what happens in school every day, that's a place that people do go. Whether you, and part of the reason they don't go there is we don't have it. And we don't, and that was part of the philosophy that I've had, was I didn't want to start something and then not be able to keep it up. And I guess I'm at a point where I think that this is an area when I look around and see where I see districts sharing good information, how do you engage with the community? This is one venue that those places have that I think is something we're lacking in. I do think we are getting to the point where we do need a communication specialist as well. We're not there yet, I understand that, and I think we'll continue to have those conversations. But even under that scenario, I still see social media as a way that we engage with parents. And I think and with general community.
So when you look at this as an overall strategy and program,
right,
you definitely want a communications director, you want this. What is the package cost? You know, because ultimately, you know, we're going to piecemeal this in until we come to the point where, okay, now we're so far down the road that, you know, we got to get a communications director. So, you know, I guess, you know, from my standpoint, it would be better to put the package together and let's look at the money and go for it, as opposed to piecemealing it into, you know, the overall communications program. And at the end of the day, it's what, you know, are those retired people going to look on Facebook to say, geez, this is how school is running? Or when you look at all those hits, are there parents that are kind of looking at the class and so forth? You know.
I guess to my end, Jack, and one of the goals we've had as a board is community engagement. And when I look at the engagement piece, it's well, who does that? Well, everybody does it. We do it in a lot of different venues right now. I mean, you have Mike, you have a kindergartner, you get the Thursday folder home. And I get the communications through Infinite Campus, which sometimes get overwhelming as far as what you're getting as far as info through there. If you're in the community, you're seeing the things that are being celebrated through the Tribune. I mean, you guys do a good job putting those pieces out there, but it leans, you have sports page and you have other. And I think there's just a lot of things that we have that we can share that we don't right now have a venue to do. And I think that as part of trying to talk about, well, what is Waunakee Schools about? What are we doing educationally? I think it's a way to tell that story. So getting to what's the cost of it, Jack? Communications person can be anywhere from 40 to 100 grand, depending on what you want to do. I think we still have to define that. The second part is, I think we're getting large enough that we can't just rely on, we've got to start talking about we have to be very much in a promotional mode, I believe, public relations mode, and being able to talk about what are those things in the district that we feel are important in the directions we're going, and we need some venues to do it. And there's not one venue that's going to meet all needs. I just think right now we have nothing in this space right now, and I think this is an opportunity for us to step into there and I think improve some of the ways that we communicate with our public. That's my opinion.
Well, we have some things in this space because some teachers and some buildings have taken it upon themselves to create a presence. And I've enjoyed, I mean, Ms. McGlynn does an excellent job with the career and technical ed pieces of it. And the kinds of things she celebrates, which is like student performance at Skills USA and different speaking contests and different, I mean, just all the different areas that they're involved in. I've learned a lot just from having access to that page. Gardens at Prairie has a similar Facebook page, and it's fun to see the parents that get involved in upgrading and weeding and planting and you know, you've got older adults working with young students, getting engaged, and the Innovation Center, I mean, to me, comes off at the top of my head as something that's ripe for that, because that's an area that we do hope to bring the community into the building and using some of that maker space and some of those wonderful facilities. And I really do like the idea of better branding and a cohesive logoing, tagline, all those different kinds of things to bring it together makes a lot of sense to me. And so, yeah, $10,000 is not nothing, but this is seems to me a very good way to tiptoe into a more cohesive means of engagement.
But I mean, back to your point, Mike, have I had people asking for it? No, I don't think I've had people specifically asking, but I do feel like that this is a place that people go for information, and in the absence of it, there's, I don't know the words, I don't think that they're specifically saying, where's your Facebook, where's your Twitter?
It's a missed opportunity.
That's I guess how I look at it, is I think this is the place that we have an opportunity to do some things that we're currently not doing. We've moved away from a lot of things. We've moved away from the Time publication a number of years ago, which used to be, and I think the feedback on that was one tied to the effort that went into putting it together, and was there the benefit as far as people reading it. I think we haven't done a lot with any community flyers, and I think some of these things have gone digitally. We have some work to do on our website. We need to update some pieces there, certainly. But even there, we have some management of how do we do that. We have a lot of hands on that, which we probably need to work on in the future. And I just see social media as a place that we can, a different venue for us to start to talk about what's going on in the district. I guess and part of the reason I brought it here was, this is a big change. So if it's something that if we're gonna go down this road, I do want the support of the board to do. If there's concerns of it, if there's more information you need, if there's something of that nature, I wanna know that too, because I don't wanna step down this, because I believe once you open it, you've gotta keep it going. So I think we've gotta be on the same page if this is the direction we wanna go. So if this is something where there's some questions, or you wanna wait till there's the fuller board here, we can certainly do that. And I'll just hold off on some of the other aspects that we'll be doing this summer and bring it back at a future meeting. But I would like us to have this dialogue. Is this a space that we want to be in?
Are there any other options other than this social school for EDU company?
As far as specifically what this is, not to my knowledge. And this one is relatively a very niche group. They only work with schools. This was a person who worked in the corporate world, really in the marketing area, and found this niche within their home school district and then has broadened it out from there. So as far as, and I can certainly look into that, but I think that there's not something that's this specific that's just in the space of telling the story of schools.
I could see that where this is helpful in the school district that is faltering a little bit, and we got charter schools that are really, you know, coming on strong, taking students away. I don't see that in Waunakee. You know, I don't see that competition. You know, I understand, you know, get the pictures out there and, you know, it'll excite you know, the population and so forth. But again, you know, it's the parents that are in school. You know, when you go to events where you don't have kids, you don't have as much vested interest.
Randy, do you see that this might be a place that we would be able to put information out about a potential referendum?
Yeah.
And, you know, I think we have to go down that road, and that's a lot of communication that needs to get out there. And just because we're pretty solid with our enrollment and people choosing Waunakee, I still think it's important that we advertise what we're doing. It isn't, I don't think we should just sit and say, oh, it's great out there, because, you know, all of a sudden a year goes by and it's not so great. You get a few people complaining, or, I mean, it doesn't take much to start a wildfire. And I just think it's, for 2 posts a day for $10,000 or $11,000, it seems like a small amount of money for that kind of advertisement and that kind of potential.
There was a Facebook page created by the Yes for Waunakee group supporting the last referendum. And it stayed active for a month or 2 after the referendum, and it's been dead for years. And that is, it does show people were paying attention at one time, and then they faded away. The concept of this type of immediate presence, my belief is that it's about not just relying on one issue to get people to pay attention,
Right.
but trying to get people to always pay attention.
That's right.
Right.
Or at least give them a chance to interact on a long-term basis over issues they may not have even thought they cared about. They may show up on the Facebook page at first because they saw something about their kid in lacrosse or something like that, or showed up because of the referendum and they were looking for something. But then because they went there, you know how the posts go. They show up in your stream for a while. If you like the page, they show up more, and then they're going to see other things that are going on.
It's
and that may
awareness.
be that may be bad sometimes, but it might be good. And the vast majority of Facebook or Twitter isn't what was originally posted. It was all the comments made about the post.
Yes.
That's the most activity. And you know, our biggest problem is we keep doing these community engagement meetings that hardly anybody shows up to, and we never hear about them the minute the meeting's over.
Right. This is an avenue
this
for
could
that,
be, would help create more of a long-term discussion, which I think, now the big thing is we're gonna have to have somebody on our side watching to see that and bring out what we should be
And that's the point.
noticing.
That's what you're hiring.
No, they don't do that.
Yeah, they do.
They show you the page hits and they show you your increase.
They follow every single message that comes back, and they're giving, if there's something that's questionable coming back, they're calling us.
Oh, okay.
talking
I
to
didn't
us.
see that in their
Yeah,
contract.
They
I
actually are
didn't see that in
monitoring
anything.
all of the
comments.
posts, all of the comments, and if there's a comment that's concerning, questioning, etc., they're contacting us to make sure we've seen it.
Okay, because their contract, I gotta admit, looked kind of sketchy.
But that's what they've done.
Did you see it too?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I agree.
It doesn't even say who owns the accounts.
Also, it's a form contract. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not objecting to social
Yeah.
media being a valuable tool.
Yeah.
I think that is right on. My concern is being treated like just another account.
Sure.
I mean, if we're telling a story, I mean, how often do you trust an independent contractor to tell your story for you?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I'm just moderately concerned that it seems like they're pitching a product to as many school districts as possible. Here's the dollar amount they get, and then Joe Blow in Minnesota somewhere is writing posts for us.
Right.
2 posts a day is great, but the cost of it is that's $14 a post.
So, but that's not my understanding. What she's seeking is she's asking staff to submit at least 2 posts a month. Then she's screening through all the posts she's getting from all the staff, and she's picking through and choosing which ones to highlight.
Right.
That was my impression of what was going on. She's
That's
gonna
accurate.
request that all the staff try to make it a personal goal to submit
Yeah.
2 things a month to her.
She wants things from staff, this is Julie said, to go to her.
And
then
then
they
she's
will be,
screening,
and
refining.
then they will be kind of figuring out what venue, and most of them will go out on multiple venues.
Yeah.
And then they'll also be following things, so if Tim puts something out on Twitter, she's following him, she's grabbing it and re-putting it out in different venues. So trying to just get the conversation larger than it currently is.
And we get one person that will work with us. It isn't a smorgasbord here. We have one person.
One person assigned to handle our account.
Right,
Right.
that's what I
Right.
understood.
Yeah.
Now, they do mention other services, and you mentioned like doing live Facebook feeds and things like that, which take a little bit more. Is there extra charges for that, I'm guessing?
I think that they would help us manage those, but I don't think there's any additional charge there. I think when you were talking about that.
That's not the way I understand it.
No, it's just that they would help us figure out how to do that, and they can.
Because I would see that as something that would be useful down the road. I'm gonna tell you, I think that if you're really hesitant about this, vote for the 1-year contract.
That's what
Yeah,
I would
it's not much
propose, going 1 year,
See how it
revisit
goes.
it after
Yep.
1 year.
Yep.
That way we can look at, the comments, the
Yep.
feedback.
So you're
we get-
basically paying an extra $1,000 so you can walk away if you don't think it's working and we decide to go in a different direction,
Yep.
which isn't a bad deal.
That's my motion.
Second.
Do you want a motion? Yeah.
Yes, I would, that'd be
Okay,
great.
that's fine. Okay.
And Dave second.
Dave second. Any other discussion on?
That's funny how we do the motions after we have the discussion. That's kind of
It's
wrong,
okay.
but we'll let that go.
All in favor for the 1-year contract?
Aye.
Aye. No chance to oppose.
Opposed? Okay. Teaching and learning, the welding grant.
Yeah, this is just one, if Rebecca, you can just pull up the,
It's not on there.
I didn't pull up that one.
It should have been number.
That's all right.
10.
We missed that.
That's all right. No worries. If you
This is
have,
the other agenda.
so this is the welding grant. I gotta pull it up so I can see it myself, so I can. But as I've kept you up to speed, that we've been trying to work, or we have been working with Enders Manufacturing on upgrading and looking at opportunities for our welding program. Randy Herbrand, who works at Enders, approached us probably about 6 months ago. He serves on the advisory council at MATC for welding, and was asking us about really what our capacities were and our abilities to look at dual credit options with MATC for welding. As we were looking at this was certainly within our staff's purview and something that was on their goals to be able to achieve at some point. But part of what they needed to do was revamp some curriculum and also upgrade the equipment we had because it did not meet the standards that were needed for the program. So now Rebecca has it up in front of us. So as part of this process and through a couple different meetings, Randy encouraged us to write a grant to the Enders Foundation. And Michelle McGlynn helped to lead this and write the grant. We also worked with Rob France, Jeff Willauer. We worked with the Ag Department and the others in the Tech Ed Department to really talk about what are some of the things that we have for a vision for this area. taking a look at if we were going to go down this road. There's really, our welding program is kind of immersed within some units within a metals class, and doesn't have its own standalone place, which is a place that we would actually like to be. So Rob France has worked with and is looking at proposing to work through the curriculum process this next fall. 3 different classes in the welding area that would line up with some of the pieces that would allow for us to get dual credit through MATC. He is working through the college to make sure that he has the credentials to be certified to do the dual credit pieces. And we wrote the grant really with the vision being that this is a direction that we were hoping to go. So what you see is we received a $25,000 grant from the Enders Manufacturing Foundation. You can see the areas that are highlighted here that have the EMC grant that are covered. So you can see some of our welding equipment here. Again, some of the other metals and welding apparatus that goes along with it, along with the dollar amounts. Michelle has it broken out here that it comes within about $100 of really what our grant is titled for. Enders has also been very generous in what they've been able to do in working with Miller Welding. You can see some of the packages on the top with a cost of about $17,000 that are coming to us at no charge. And those are some things that they've worked with their suppliers on. So you really look at what we are receiving from Enders, and the support is the grant for $25,000 and then some in-kind donations of equipment at the $17,000 level. Michelle's also looking at her CTE grant and some other areas that we're able to cover some of these other expenses. And that's where she's articulated that in a few different places. But we're also looking at the one item that they've encouraged us to continue to look at, and that we have as kind of a long reach goal for us, is to purchase a augmented reality unit, which is basically a virtual reality welding process. And I think the piece that we're looking at that's exciting about that is it allows you to basically put on your welding helmet, and it has virtual reality within inside of it that you can see like you were welding underwater on a different plate. So it gives you the virtual reality experience of welding. And the piece that the staff are excited about with regards to that, it allows you to do things in a very non-scary manner. There's no sparks involved. They're hoping to use that as a recruiting tool to show people different aspects of this as a profession, and also giving kids the opportunity to be able to apply some of their welding experiences in a virtual realm in this case, but to be able to see how it would be actually applied in different settings. So this was an aspect that Enders thought would be a huge enhancement to our program. That's not funded through this grant, but it's some things that we have some dollars from our CTE grant we can put towards. We'll probably take a look at some of our Innovation Center dollars, and we can also then take a look at if there's other fundraising opportunities or other district funds that we could use. But overall, it's a really exciting story to see kind of what's happening in the welding department at the high school. Staff are excited about it, and we've got great support from Enders as far as what they're putting forth. And you'll see some of the curriculum aspects find their way through the process coming in the fall. Yeah.
So you can add that augmented reality unit at a later date.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can get this started with the money.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. That's just that's the nice to have piece that we're going to be working towards. Correct. So we'll be able to get working towards the dual credit and the curricular pieces without the augmented reality piece. Correct. Absolutely.
So you'll be implementing this summer?
We'll be working on the equipment pieces this summer. The curriculum pieces will have about a year out because they have to work their way through the curriculum process next year. So you'll see them come through the board, and then we'll be ready to launch those in fall of 19. And Rob France is also going through and getting making sure he has all of his credentials to be able to offer that through the dual credit through the college.
So before you use this for curriculum, it's not next year, but the following year.
Yeah, we'll start using it this coming year, but the actual classes that'll line up with it will come in the year after that. Correct.
There's got to be a way that we can raise that 22 million.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, 22.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Did you talk to this welding shop next to us?
Not yet, no. No, but those are it's the same conversation I think we had around some of the innovation center. This is a pretty, I think a piece that we can work in that direction towards.
I mean, I'm familiar with most of this equipment, and I don't see a big issue, but there's no work we'd have to do electrically or anything in the lab to house any of this.
Oh, good question.
There is some of that actually we're working with Mike, our internal electrician, to be assessing, and there are some different things that he has to change up within this.
Yeah, a 20 meg stick is going to take a very different outlet than what
So
I'm guessing you currently have.
Right, so we're working through some of those through Joe's department to assess that.
But we're not expecting a dollar value much on that.
I don't really have much of a dollar value. No, that's in process right now.
So would that be done internally by our people, or?
Yeah, that's what we're looking at, yes. Some of that's still in process piece, but yes.
So what do you need on this?
Nothing. This is informational. I just think this was good. This was good news as far as great partnership with Enders, and very appreciative of how they're helping us move that program forward. So that's all it is.
Thank you. Administrative reports, announcements?
I don't have anything here today.
Committee reports, starting with budget. Steve, I think you have to do that.
I'll take that, thank you,
You're
Kelly.
done, yeah.
So there are 4 action items this evening that were voted on by the budget committee. All were voted on 2-0 motions to recommend approval by the full board tonight. And then there's a 5th item that the budget committee did not review, which I'll talk about at the end. So the 4 action items requested by the committee tonight begins with the 2017-18 budget changes. Once a year, we do present a budget change document that highlights all of the changes that occurred during the school year. The Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction does require that document to then be published in the Waunakee Tribune so the members of the community can see it. The changes are identified for you. As we went over this with the budget committee, these are all items that the majority of the school board members have seen these throughout the year. As an example, the most significant change is one that you're all familiar with, which was the pay increases were approved in the month of November after the budget was approved in October. So the funds need to be moved into the appropriate salary lines for all of the individual staff members. Warrior Stadium, which you were aware of, the donation from the Waunakee Area Education Foundation has to be recorded, as well as the expenses for the project. And you see those budget revisions identified in your board book notes. In the board book attachment is the document that actually is presented to the Waunakee Tribune to be published in the paper. The budget committee did review the budget changes and is recommending to the full board approval tonight. As I mentioned, on a 2-0 vote, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about this agenda item.
So you want a motion?
Motion to approve as presented.
Motion by Jack.
I'll second it.
Any other discussion or questions for Steve? If not, all in favor of the 17-18 budget changes? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Okay, the next item is consideration of the second draft of the 2018-19 budget. The first draft was presented to the school board and approved during the month of May. During the second draft of the budget, there are changes that are reflected in the document. Those are identified in your board book notes as changes numbers 1 through 8. The majority of these changes were reviewed with the budget committee and the full school board in May. A good example of that would be the student fees approved by the school board at the May board meeting are then incorporated into this budget document for the June board meeting. You see several other things specifically mentioned from the May meeting. Other pieces you've seen before, so when Herb has presented his technology budget, you've heard him talk about the state personal computing grant for 9th graders. We've talked about the state mental health grant for social workers. We've talked about a resource allocation model for grades K through 8. So at this point, we are looking at those items identified between numbers 1 and 8, incorporating them into the second draft of the budget. You do see in the board book notes that we do bring back a third draft of the budget in July. We identify at least 6 areas so far that might potentially be revised between June and July. After reviewing the second draft of the budget committee members were recommending approval this evening on a 2-0 vote. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Motion to approve as
Second.
presented.
Motion by Jack, second by Mike. Any discussion or questions for Steve? If not, all in favor of the second draft of the budget, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, thank you.
So the third action item is consideration of 2018-19 lease agreements. At the committee meeting, we did discuss the lease agreements that the district has with the Wisconsin Youth Company, which is a K-4 after-school program that operates at all 3 of our elementary schools as well as during the summer session. Dane County, which rents space at Heritage Elementary, and then the New Teacher Project, which rents space at the Heritage Elementary. Administration was recommending increasing the Wisconsin Youth Company lease from $2,450 to $2,500 per building, maintaining the other 2 leases at the current level. The committee members did request, not for this evening, but as we look for the next year, a review of the Wisconsin Youth Company lease amount, specifically comparing that to what it might cost for space privately in the community and whether or not that fee should be increased. So the committee did request that review for a future version of the lease, not necessarily the recommendation for this evening. So I just wanted to note that. With that, the committee did recommend increasing the lease to $2,500 and continuing the other 2 leases at the current level. That was approved on a 2-0 motion to move forward this evening for full school board consideration.
Motion to approve is presented with the stipulation to review next year.
Motion by Jack. Need a second?
Second.
Any discussion or questions? All in favor of the lease agreement, say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, thank you.
I feel like I've been longer.
The last item that the budget committee reviewed that we're requesting consideration on is the fund balance classifications. Annually, the school board is required to approve the fund balance classifications that we end up using during the audit process in the summer. By having school board approval, that defines for the business manager working with the auditors what accounts are allowed to be used as we work through the audit process this summer. We then bring back to the school board during the month of September what those final numbers look like when the audit process has been completed. I am not recommending any changes. We do have a number of fund balance accounts that we are currently utilizing. There are not any that I am aware of that we currently would like to utilize that we are not using on the document that was attached. So at this point, the budget committee did recommend approving the current fund balance classifications and recommended full board approval this evening.
Motion to approve is presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of the fund balance classification?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Okay, so the last item that we are looking for approval of tonight has not been seen by the school board before. And I do want to point out something that we are looking for your feedback on this evening. So we have our business insurance bids. Our agent is a Waunakee agent through Hub International, so the Hub office located here in Waunakee. We also have an insurance consultant that we work with who is independent, who continuously reviews all of our policies and makes recommendations to us. We like to seek proposals at least every other year, just to make sure that we are receiving the most competitive proposals. This year we sought all of our proposals through our agent, Hub International, asked them to request proposals from multiple carriers. And I want to point your attention to the handout that was provided, the one that's got various colors on it that I put in front of you this evening. To the far right, we have identified our current premiums. And if you go all the way down to the bottom and you look at the yellow number, our current premiums are $251,000. That's what we're spending right now on what we would call business insurance. So our property insurance is held by a company called Liberty. Our workers' comp and liability insurances are held by a company called EMC. If you look immediately to the left of where the 17-18 premiums are identified, and that's the purple column, this is the purple column identifies the best proposal we received from EMC. And again, EMC is the current carrier. You do see at the very bottom under a darker blue color, EMC has offered a 35% dividend on workers' comp, which is really a return on a portion of your workers' comp premiums the year before. That means their net premium is $244,000. Compared to where we are right now at $251,000, that would actually be a reduction in our business insurance costs of about $7,000. That's a fixed dividend, meaning that that is the amount that we would receive the following year. What I need to contrast that with you is on the other side in the green, we have a proposal that would combine a new workers' comp carrier, which is called Argent, with a new liability carrier called CIC. The difference, if you go and look at the blue, is the flat or fixed rate workers' comp premium is 25% instead of 35%. But there is a slider that would go up to 41% depending on our workers' comp loss ratio. The 41% means we would have to have 0 losses in workers' comp, which is not possible. So we would never achieve the 41% that they've identified. But as a board member, you would look at a policy through EMC at $244,000 that's fixed versus a policy from Argent and CIC that can range from even potentially lower to potentially higher than what we're currently spending. A difference between a 35% dividend and a 25% dividend is significant when you're looking at a workers' compensation premium as large as ours is. But Argent will come back and say, with the slider, we would have the potential to get back to where we currently are. Our independent insurance consultant has stated that the liability coverage provided by CIC has higher levels of coverage in some areas, specifically the cyber policy. But what we really are looking at here is a difference between ultimately a fixed dividend on our most expensive line of insurance, which is workers' comp, versus more of a sliding policy that you would see from Ardent, which is in the green. So a lot of it really depends on how you would have, what kind of risk tolerance you might take. If you're really looking for locking in the savings, you would look at the 35% dividend that they're offering, and you would see we have a $7,000 savings by switching to them on our business insurance. In the green, you would look at the possibility of, if we had 0 claims next year on workers' comp, the savings could be even higher. But with the 25% dividend, you actually will see what's more likely is probably an increase in our costs from where we are right now. So the 251 would more likely go up to the 255 type range, based on the fact that the dividend is fixed or guaranteed at 25%. So apologize for handing out something this complicated at the meeting, but there are 2 very solid options for consideration. It all depends on what your, I would say, risk tolerance is between accepting a fixed 35% dividend and one that could potentially go up to 41% if everything goes perfect next year. Julie?
Explain to me what cyber liability is. What are we insuring against there?
So cyber liability is the one area that our consultant has identified that she believes the policy from CIC is stronger than EMC.
Right.
Cyber liability is a policy that would protect the school district in the event that our systems were hacked, information was stolen. As an example, our financial data, if it was stolen and sold, that type of a policy would step in to then protect the district. We can purchase additional cyber policies if we would like. So as an example, EMC, we could work with them as a carrier and Hub as our agent to purchase additional protection as well. So we're not necessarily limited to only what we see on this document in front of us. But you did rightly point out, Julie, that is the one area that our insurance consultant says is a difference between the 2 proposals, is that the CIC is stronger.
Yeah, it looks like roughly twice the coverage, if I'm reading it right.
Yep, that's correct.
What is our workman's comp modifier?
So our workers' comp modifier is somewhere a little under 0.7 right now. So for a school district, that's a very good number. We've had a strong recent history of low workers' compensation claims. We did have one serious claim in the last year, year and a half. But besides that, we have had very low claims in the workers' comp area in the last couple of years. But a year of 0 would be incredibly unlikely. We've never had that before. And actually, when our agent reviewed where we have been in the past, we would not get up to the 35% level with the Ardent proposal based on our recent history. It would be very, very difficult to achieve the 35% level.
Could we get to 30%?
It is certainly possible we could get to 30%.
And then where do we, if that's 30%, what is the price? Because this, you get, if I could only read this thing.
Yeah, it's not easy to read in that darker blue.
Could you read this for me?
Read what that number is.
No.
I can. Which number do you want?
The dark blue underneath the Argent that has the range.
41,146 to 67,480.
And then the number to the right, please.
25% flat up to 41% at 0%.
So the first number that Julie read began with the flat of 25 and went up to the 41. So a 30 would probably be about a fourth of the way above the 41, roughly.
So is that then, if we could get to 30, would that put us in the same range then as this 244?
Probably pretty close.
It'd be very close. It would be incredibly close. Yes, that's right, Jack.
So then, with the better cybersecurity, I would be prone to go with the 1 3.
But that is a slight, oh, I see.
So what you're saying, Jack, is that you'd like to take the risk and hope that we get to 30 in order to get also the additional cybersecurity support. That's really what you're saying. Is you think we could potentially hit the 30, have that be cost effective, and then have the increased cybersecurity benefit.
And I will say that
there's some type of safety plan or training. Where do our safety or workman's comp, is that given in the shop or teachers?
Custodians?
the most serious claim that we've had recently was in the custodial maintenance department. That is the most common area, but it has been really, really good recently, just besides the one major incident, which really was an equipment failure incident. Other than that, we've actually had very low workers' comp claims in the last couple of years and have done really well in that area. And you're exactly right, Jack. I mean, when you look at the information on the cyber and to the far left, our insurance consultant looks at this objectively and says the coverages are better with the proposal on the left, which is the Ardent and the CIC. But you do just know there's a little bit of a risk that instead of the locked in 35% dividend, there's a range being offered.
Yep.
I would probably suggest, do we have a safety training program?
We do, yes.
So do the insurance people come in and do that?
They do.
Yeah. Do the insurance people have like little incentives, like, you know, if you've got goals out there, you meet the goals, you know, they buy lunch or something like that, or buy a pizza?
They have not done that, no.
Like that.
Did it for me. It's been done in the past.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's really the two major differences, and either option is a strong proposal, and we're really looking for the board's guidance on which proposal you think you would support. And Jack, you've made your feedback on the proposal on the left, which is the one that does have the higher level of coverage.
Hub is local.
Hub is local, and either way, all of these proposals are coming through the local Hub office, and they would remain our agent. They are able to represent all of these companies, so our relationship with our Hub agent will remain irregardless of the decision that's made tonight.
Any other comments?
I think one of the bigger things I've heard is that quite often you get into too high a level of coverage that just never gets used by anybody. I mean, is there some version between these two, the higher level of coverage is almost meaningless? Or do we see cases where schools end up hitting into those higher levels when something does happen?
In the cyber area, yes, schools have gotten into that area, which is why our consultant is recommending, as Julie pointed out, it's almost a doubling of the level because of her concern that in the event that something did happen, this would be an exposure area for us.
And if it goes bad, chances are it's going to go really bad.
Yes, exactly.
And if we did take the one with the double coverage, the one on the far left, we're really at worst looking at a $6,000 increase.
Correct.
That's correct.
Versus potential for lower, and it's the only one that's that close to our current one other than the one that's lower, but then half the coverage.
Correct, that's correct.
Motion to take the green.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor of the green?
Aye.
Aye.
You and I agree.
Opposed?
That should be in the minutes.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Curriculum committee.
Did you want to update us, Tim? We had a lot of items for discussion. I don't think there's anything for us to vote on tonight, is there?
Not for tonight.
Yeah.
The one item we voted on is going to be a July meeting item. I think, kind of the key thing that you will want to be kind of aware of as the board is a few of the items we had coming in were kind of early information items for the committee on some items that we're looking at administratively, we're going to develop further and bring forward in the fall. So those were some updates to our career and technical education classes at the middle school. Both a redesign of the mandatory 7th grade course and bringing in potentially some additional options in business education, marketing, and ag and life sciences. And then the other two are a desire on the part of the middle school faculty to look at a modified last day of the school year for 7th graders. The last day is a morning only. They're interested in doing more with the 8th graders as part of the 8th grade recognition that morning. And so it looks like they're going to want to bring a proposal forward early in the fall to not have 7th graders attend that last morning in June.
And keep in mind that we also made a change a couple years back that the 7th graders go by themselves for a single day at the beginning of the year. So 7th graders already do an extra day at the beginning of the year, and this would allow it to balance out at the other end of the 8th graders.
So Marcy's going to survey parents of incoming 7th grade in the summer with the registration material. She'll reconvene with her faculty. Then she'll bring some more information into Randy in the fall. And the other piece is that Brian shared with us, and I agree with him that we need to consider this, is looking at ways to increase student participation in state assessments at 9th and 10th grade. That's the Aspire assessment. We've had a high number of opt-outs. We had 12% of students opt out of taking the Aspire this year, and it's going to come onto the accountability report card starting a little over a year from now. So we really want to look at engaging kids more. So we'll try to get a sense of what's motivating the opt-outs, and Brian is going to engage his various stakeholders in the discussion of, are there incentives which would help kids who are not currently participating participate.
Which there was a lot of discussion on that item because we did try an incentive a few years back, and the incentive was that if you improved and made jumps on that and took it seriously, you could opt out of taking your finals. That was really, really popular with students, but it's hard to find an appropriate incentive that will motivate them, but not kind of give away the candy store. So if people have suggestions or strong feelings on that, I mean, obviously we'll be taking it back to staff as well to get input on suggestions. We would be open to that.
These were not proposals to implement. These were just kind of early notices of things that we're talking about. I think those are kind of the most important. We also spent some time on the senior exit survey. We looked at the items. We'll be bringing that back at the next meeting, which is probably going to be August. We'll have comments. It'll be redacted. We'll bring in some kind of long-term, year-to-year information so we can look at trends too.
I did look at that survey a lot, and every year I always look at that one. And there's always something surprising in there. This year, the thing I was stunned by, that most of them said that they were able to take the classes they wanted. With all the classes we've been adding, I keep expecting that number to go down, saying, I couldn't get to them all, but it doesn't seem to be happening, which I think is great, that they're getting the classes they want, and there's not too many out there that they can't get to. But then I always also get surprised by how many students we have saying it's okay to do drugs and alcohol in school. I mean, it's over 80% in almost all those categories. on the drugs and alcohol and whether kids are doing it in school and whether they think it's okay, which to me is extremely high. And then 50% say we don't provide a good, safe environment against drugs and alcohol, which to me is kind of a high number too. I mean, it's almost an even split between good and bad. And every year when you look at the harassment items, which I think it's great that you add them and you break them down into categories, which is helpful. And the one that always comes up the highest is gender identity. And that comes up the highest harassment level, and it also comes up as the one we do the least education on, compared to a lot of the other categories. At least that's the way the high school seniors are seeing it. Yet, I don't know if we've ever, it just seems like at some point we should start using these numbers and start saying, where should we go next? Each time I know we've talked about them almost every year. I don't know if we've gone in much detail, but if we're seeing that the harassment is mostly in one category and we're not doing, they say we're not doing the education in that category, then we should start looking at shifting something in order to help reduce that.
I mean, and the exit survey is, we have a few different pieces of perceptions data we look at different levels, but the senior exit survey is one of our more highly valued pieces of perceptions data that we've had over time. We've done it for more than a decade. We feel students in May, in their senior year, they're going to kind of be very honest with us. But I do think, at the committee's request, as we looked at kind of our human growth and development work in the upcoming year, we added some questions on education in that area, which I agree, they do kind of cross-tab in interesting ways with the harassment findings and the others. So we know we have some work to do in that area. The other thing is we know that AODA issues, the alcohol and drug issues, are really one of our focus areas. We have a lot of different pieces of data. The one thing we are always careful of when we look at the data, and we actually talked about this for a while at the committee, is on this particular survey, there really aren't any items where students talk about their own behavior. They talk about what they see with other students. And so the question is,
how the questions are written.
And their limitation, and we talked about the limitations of that, and the need to look at other sources of data and maybe tighten up the wording on that question next year, because obviously the perception of what's going on around the students, that's important too, because that affects their mindset, that affects kind of their perception of our school environment, which is critical. But we also really need to make sure we have better data on students self-reporting their actual choices and behaviors. But we spend a lot of time on that, and Joan, Julie, and Mike were there. They probably have perspectives.
It's almost like you need a second question after the one, I believe 80% of, or whatever. I mean, I believe it's easy to use alcohol at school events. Then you almost need to follow that up with.
Did you ever do it?
Yes, or even checking a box, how many times, kind of thing.
But a lot of those questions are on that Dane County risk survey, and I guess that came into play as we have some data about use, and this was more about perception.
Some of the things that have been done, Dave, I mean, you've obviously got the Community Cares Coalition is one group that's community-wide that wasn't there 4 years ago. That's a positive piece. We've added one of our social workers is specifically is responsible for AODA pieces. At our admin meetings coming up later on this week, we'll be sharing what Joan talked about, the data from the recent Dane County Youth Risk Assessment Survey, particularly related around AODA. And that is a piece we want to be talking about to see what does that look like, not only high school, but how does that look as far as educationally, what should we be doing across the board. So I think those are all pieces that are on our radar as far as what's the data saying, and then how do we start to do some better programming around it.
Now, you were saying in a couple months you're bringing this back.
Yes.
And you're going to bring back the historical on some of these questions, or?
Well, we wanted the comment part, and they were going to read.
The comment part's going to get redacted on names.
Yes.
Right.
But like, for example, if we see the harassment question,
Where's
if
it
we saw
going?
that for the last 5, 7, 8 years, say, where did it go? Has it gotten worse in one area? Has it gotten better? Is it going? Now, the bad thing is you're dealing with self-reporting.
Yeah.
So yeah, you get 277 students out of how many? And then the problem is, it's, you know, it's always who answers the question. But still, I think it might be helpful to try and look to see if there is a trend, if we're fighting the trend, or if we're watching it grow.
Yeah, and so this is a survey we have given for, I don't know if I think 2005, class of 2005 might have been our first year with it. And we've given it very much the current form with some modifications, but not many, since about 2010. So we can go back and easily provide for most of these items a good 8 years of data, and can look at the trends. And as you know, we discussed in the committee, you get additional detail coming out of the comments as well. So that's going to be something that will happen when the committee next meets, which is probably going to be the second Tuesday in August.
Thank
It's a
you,
big
Ken.
topic.
Thank you. The HR committee, again, no action items, but Connie, do you want to make any comments about the discussions?
We discussed changes to the employment guidelines for each of the employee groups that will come before the board for a first reading next month. We talked briefly about biometric screening that's currently a requirement under the health insurance plan, and how we're working with Dean SSM to create options for employees that will be more meaningful. That will come eventually through the insurance committee for further conversation at the board level. We spent quite a bit of time talking about the teacher workday and scheduling, and two topics that fall under there. One is compensation for teachers who substitute for other teachers, and the other was the collapsed schedule and how that can affect the specialists. Again, a lot of conversation, no action items on those topics. And finally, we spent quite a bit of time talking about the board's vision for compensation and benefits, and started to talk about plans for moving forward and options for moving employee groups beyond average pay. Any questions from anybody?
Thank you. Facility committee.
At the facility committee, we talked about going out to bid for our HVAC contract. We've worked with NAMI for the last 10 years, and we feel they're doing a good job. It's just we want to make sure that we're honest. And so the major discussion was about the Andover controller and how do we get competitive bids for that. So we gave the direction to put some bid documents together to go out to bid. And you know, we think NAMI could potentially be a little bit similar to the Langer's contract as well. So the other thing we talked about was the proposal that was being put together, the grant proposal, safety school grant proposal. How was that money going to be spent? You know, where was it going to be focused? And it looks like the bulk of it, or a lot of it, is going to be on the film for the doors, protect the doors. We talked about some of the things that we thought could be put in the grant, like cameras and things like that, but they were in process before and didn't qualify. So there was some good discussion around that. And then there was good discussion around the future growth requirements, what referendums were going to be needed. And one of the things that we looked at that was presented at the meeting was to keep up our buildings, it's going to cost us about $4 million a year, you know, just to keep them at par. And you know, instead of deferring maintenance, you know, over the long term, Dave came up with an idea to, you know, if we do go out to referendum, stage it. So if the referendum passed in year 1, it might be 400,000. Year 2, 800, 1,200, until in 10 years you're up to that $4 million, and then that's where it's at. And then you kind of stabilize the maintenance in the buildings. We talked about middle school and the need for middle school. The direction that we gave administration was go back and take a look at the numbers as to what the projected growth was going to be, because we did see in the Mark Roffers, when he presented at the board, that enrollment would decline in the next 3 years to like 31 students. You know, we also talked about, you know, not only the middle school, but in elementary. So, you know, in a long-range plan, you're looking at 3 potential referendums that would go out. How would they fit together, and you know, where do we go? So the maintenance one seemed good, but obviously we've got to do some more discussion on it.
I can just add a couple things that Jack kind of hit on. The piece that we'll be bringing back, and Steve and I will work on it, will probably come back in August-ish timeframe, is looking at the Mark Roffer's report on growth, comparing that with the work that Joe did with Findorf on our long-range maintenance, and how do those play together with regards to our plan moving forward. So that's kind of the referendum type discussion as far as timing. When does that potentially go, and then what do those look like as far as some of our needs? Safety grant that Jack alluded to was submitted last week. Joe and Herb worked very diligently on that to meet those objectives. There were significant requirements we needed to follow. Some of the things you talked about earlier, Julie, with like the film and such, and then looking at visitor management and communication systems were really what the grant was written for. So we'll see where that
was what, 100,000?
122,000, somewhere in that neighborhood.
So we've submitted and we're in a holding pattern waiting to hear back.
Yes, that's correct.
I think the first one got awarded just last week.
First 800,000 in Kenosha.
Yep, so we submitted, they were due on Friday, we submitted them midweek.
Okay.
So, yep.
You need a motion from the full board for that bid proposal?
No. It was really a discussion, a feedback item, and we were looking for some direction. And that's, we'll move forward with that, then that'll come back through once that's complete.
Dave, did you have anything to add, or?
Lost my place, but let's see. Facilities policy.
Policy.
Is that our last one? Whoa.
Want to take it? Do you want me to walk it through?
You can do it.
All right. Excellent. What we have in front of us tonight are 2 different things. We first of all have a first reading of the high school graduation policy. Really the changes that are with regards to that are just some cleanup language with regards to when we moved to different levels of credits for science and math specifically, that we no longer had a phase-in time for 16-17, so we're modifying the policy in that respect. We also added some language that just clarified the online Phi-Ed was up to a 0.5 credits earned through the virtual learning, and just clarifying that so that that was well articulated. And then the last part was the change from state law with regards to the score that was needed on the citizenship test. So those are the changes for the first reading. There's no action needed on this item. It's really informational, or if there are questions that the board would have.
I have a question. On the virtual Phi-Ed,
yep.
Because we didn't have the language before, it was actually possible to take more virtual Phi-Ed than it is now.
That was the question.
We're actually putting a cap on it now, right?
When the motion was made and when we worked it through the board, we talked about it being up to 5.5 credits from my recollection, but we never had anything policy written from that. And there was questions from
I know
that.
Since it wasn't articulated, they were getting more requests. So administration asked us to handle it policy-wise to decrease the number of requests. Now, I also made an additional request that we try to find out why students are choosing the online option. So supposedly they're surveying and gathering more information as well to find out.
So in a weird way though, we used to, by not having that statement, some kids were requesting more and taking more virtual Phi-Ed than the half credit, right? Now they're gonna be limited, no one can go more than half a credit.
So what really happened is this is the second summer that we had opened up the criteria as we discussed last year. And so what the high school noticed this year was they were having repeat students come back in a way that hadn't occurred before, and they felt the need for policy language to see fewer of those and have fewer meetings to say no. Now, there will always be, and this is really true for anything, where if you have a kid with an exceptional medical need, then you might do something differently. But absent that kind of a circumstance.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If we put in the language as it is, how do you get the leeway to give that?
We make exceptions all the time.
Because we don't.
No, I mean, for example, if you had a student that just because of medical reasons was unable to take the career workshop course, for example, that is listed as a specific requirement, we find ways for them to do that in an alternative way, but they would not take that exact course. You can count, on one hand the number of times, this would happen.
Okay, I just want to make sure we aren't in a way tying a hand that.
No,
sure.
No.
We're just clarifying it, as Julie said, so that when there's asks about this, that it shows the intent of what we actually.
Yeah, this policy reflects the intent, which the intent was you could do it for one of your 3 semesters.
Right.
That was the intent.
Right. Okay. So this is the first. Any other questions on this policy? All right. So this will come back next month, and then that'll be the second reading, and we'll vote at that time. The next item are 4 policies. There are 4 policies that were on our second reading. And my apologies, we actually voted on those in the middle of this winter, and then we never brought them back for the second reading, so we caught that. And we said we better bring them back. So this has already been through the first reading, and most of this is all cleanup language with regards to some of the changes in state law with regards to the open enrollment pieces, the assessments, post-secondary opportunities, and then updating our medication administration for students. So this is our second reading. It's been through our first reading of the board. At that point, I don't believe there were any questions, and it did, and these were all forwarded through and approved by the policy committee. So my recommendation would be for approval of the second reading of those 4 policies as listed.
Move approval of the 4 policies as listed for a second reading.
Second.
Second by Mike. Any discussion on any of those policies? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Consent agenda. So I think we can take them all unless somebody wants to pull something out.
Motion to approve consent agenda.
Before we vote, just to clarify, on the financial report, will we next month be getting an updated on the wellness clinic? Were you not going to include those? Are you doing it every quarter? Is that what I'm assuming?
So Connie and I and Randy actually met with the dean team probably 3-4 weeks ago, shared with them the information we were receiving in the quarterly reports, shared with them the information that we had been receiving in their monthly reports now that we're using the EPIC system, and requested a review because there was some inconsistency, meaning certain pieces of data were being reported. So as an example, Dean health plan contracted savings were included in the quarterly reports, but were not listed in the monthly reports. We shared that there is a goal of having consistent regular monthly reporting and a need to have that information presented so that is the same information that you're looking at for month to month. We've had a lot of good things that have happened in a very short period of time after that meeting. The reporting piece was one of those that we described was more urgent and needing to get that done. So it's not included here, but we did state a goal of having that for our next board meeting.
Thank you.
So that's what our communication was on that topic.
And then I just have one other comment on the audit communication. I just will clarify and state again how pleased I am with the new set of outside auditors that we have. It feels to me like every communication we get is much more thorough, professionally presented, and complete, and I just really appreciate that we switched auditors. They're doing good.
Good.
So I think we have a motion on the table, but it needs a second.
Second.
So David made the motion. Any other discussion on any of the consent agenda items? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Opposed? Thank you. Board business? Nothing?
Just meetings.
So future agendas and meetings.
Actually, only need 2 between now and the July meeting. One of them we already have scheduled. Co-curricular meeting committee meets on June 20th at 7:30 in the morning. And the other one that I would like to schedule is the policy committee, if possible. Mike, Mark, and Julie. So I know, Julie, you're gone for a period there. And when I'm looking at kind of the schedules that I know that people hold, I'm hoping the 28th of June might work for a policy meeting. So
If it could be later in the day, that would be helpful.
I can put it wherever you'd like it. I'm open that whole day.
What day are in?
28th, Thursday the 28th of June.
I am painfully open that day.
All right.
Painfully open.
Well, that's not good. It means that either my schedule missed something
Just-
or.
Just anything 4 o'clock or later,
All right.
whatever works.
If we did like a 4:30, that work?
Sure.
So,
4:30, all right, 4:30 on the 28th. That's all I needed.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.